What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot to get into in the world of volleyball, such as Loyola pulling off a big win on the road against Hawaii. How big was that win for the Ramblers, and did they keep it going in their matches against Stanford? Also, how about BYU taking down Ball State? But what just happened with Ball State, and why did they look so off? And also, how about GCU having a strong showing at the ASICS Invitational, taking down not one, not two, but three teams? Also, Stanford picked up a big win yesterday, but who did they beat? And we have some NCAA women's volleyball news, not just transfer news, but some coaching changes, and we have a new rule that's going to be implemented, a couple new rules for that matter. So hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday morning, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 228 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on several social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and formerly known as Twitter, X, at IE Sports Radio. We also have a Facebook page for those that still use Facebook. All you just have to do is type in the word IE Sports then Radio in the search bar, like us, and then that's how you're able to follow us. We also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, for all of your latest sports news, and it's a daily updated website. And we have ourselves a blog, a Hall of Fame, our Fans of the Month, our page dedicated to each podcast, such as Set Point, our community forum, and our merchandise shop. For the last 9 years, going on 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. A huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, it's low in sugar, and high in protein. This is some of the best jerky you can get your hands on, and all you have to do is visit www.planetjerky.net and place your order. In addition, prices are slashed when it comes to Planet Jerky's Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, and if you buy $50 or more on an order, you get shipping for free! Once again, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet. And the way you can follow Set Point on social media is on X at set_point.ie and on Instagram at set_point.IESR. And you can follow me, Teran Rodriguez, on X, which is where I'm mainly active, at Teran Rodriguez1. I post some volleyball content, but now isn't really the season, but soon. But without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball content. So we have to recap week one of the NCAA men's volleyball season, and it was quite a fun week as the AVCA coaches poll actually did not get released until Wednesday. Contrary to what popular belief, the season actually began on Tuesday when Wabash took on number 11 Ball State in Muncie, Indiana. The two also played on Wednesday, but this was the official NCAA men's volleyball season opener for the 2024 season. And to no one's true surprise, Ball State took down Wabash in straight sets, and that's how basically the NCAA men's volleyball season began. It began with Ball State just basically overpowering Wabash. And this is nothing against Wabash, but this was kind of the expected result. All right, but to the AVCA coaches poll, the AVCA/NVA National Collegiate Men's Volleyball Coaches Poll. So this was released on Wednesday, as I said, and instead of a top 15 like they have done in previous weeks, it's now a top 20. NCAA men's volleyball is growing to the point where it's now no longer a top 15. It's now a top 20, which I think is amazing, and that is something I actually did not know until Wednesday. So it kind of sucks that I had to do my show on Monday, but hey, I'm a Monday guy, and this has always been on Mondays, until further notice. More on that later. But 20 through 16 consisted of George Mason at 20, Lincoln Memorial at 19, Charleston at 18, CSUN, or Cal State Northridge, at 17, and Lewis at 16. 15 through 11 consisted of UC Santa Barbara at 15, Princeton at 14, Pepperdine at 13, USC at 12, and Ball State at 11. 10 through 6 consisted of Loyola Chicago at 10, BYU at 9, Stanford at 8, Grand Canyon at 7, and Penn State at 6. 5 through 1 consisted of Ohio State at 5, UC Irvine at 4, Hawaii at 3, Long Beach State at 2, and your number one team to start out the NVA/AVCA National Collegiate Men's Volleyball Coaches Poll is UCLA, which garnered all the first place votes regarding the entire coaches poll, or the men's volleyball collegiate poll. So there you have it right there. That was basically week 1. And as I mentioned, Ball State was number 11. But the true season began on Wednesday. But Tuesday was kind of the appetizer for our volleyball interest. So everyone thought that Loyola and Hawaii were the ones that kicked off the season, correct? No. Like I said, Wabash and Ball State were the ones that kicked off the season, but there was also another matchup. I mean, obviously Wabash and Ball State played one another on Wednesday, and then Ball State also played Thomas More following their match against Ball State, or against Wabash. But Ball State was able to beat Wabash and Thomas More to go 3-0 in the span of 2 days, which is good. But there was another notable matchup other than Loyola Hawaii. It was actually North Greenville at number 5, Ohio State. So Ohio State was able to win this matchup as Ohio State did not trail at any point of the match. There were times where it was tied, but Ohio State didn't really have too many problems with North Greenville. I will admit, though, North Greenville kind of held their own, but unfortunately for North Greenville, they just could not get to them, as Ohio State just showed its true potential, as Jacob Pastor led the way with 12 kills, Cole Young had 10 kills, Shane Wetzel 7 kills, Ohio State hit 350, North Greenville hit 254, as Diego Rosic led the way for North Greenville with 9 kills, while Logan Keothavi led the way with 6 kills. Well, he also added 6 kills to go along with Diego Rosic's 9 kills. So my takeaway for this matchup is this. North Greenville didn't play bad per se, but when you're on the road and you're taking on the number 5 team in the nation, you're kind of going to need to play mistake-free. And unfortunately, against a team like Ohio State, they just did not do that. But this is a learning experience, and this is a good way to get some of these big matches out of the way and get your learning experience up. I really think North Greenville does have potential to win the Conference of Carolinas, whereas Ohio State, I definitely think, can win the MIVA, or at least vie for the conference championship, or at least an at-large spot in the NCAA tournament. Either way, Ohio State showed its potential, and Jacob Pastor was just on one in that matchup. And it was only a 3-set match. Now getting on over to the matchup that people really care for, Loyola, number 10, Loyola Chicago, at number 3, Hawaii. So in this matchup, Loyola did not have Dan Mangun, their setter, as they actually started Cole Show. Well, they didn't start Cole Schobel at first. They actually started Ryan McElliott, and then they went to Cole Schobel in the second set. But Hawaii was also without their setter, as Kevin Calling actually got hurt in warm-ups, and he's going to be out for an extended period of time, according to from my sources from Hawaii. So getting the start from Hawaii at setter was Teran Rosenthal. Now, you all probably have heard me talk about Teran Rosenthal, how he reclassified as he was. This year was supposed to be his senior year at Miracosta, but then he reclassified, graduated early, and now he was training with the Hawaii men's volleyball team after their season last season. Now, well, in the off season of last season, but regardless, Teran Rosenthal graduated early, and he's now in college, and he's only 17 years old, and let's just say he looked pretty good. So the first set, it looked like Loyola was going to take the opening set. They were actually doing a good job of maintaining the lead. They were up 16-14 at the media timeout, but then Hawaii kind of stepped on the gas. It wasn't just in serving, but they swung the ball really well. They took the opening set 25-23 off of a missed serve from Loyola. Loyola really struggled with serving, but I can't say the same for Hawaii. The second set, it was pretty much all Hawaii as they took that set 25-19. And then the third set, Loyola actually was up by as many as I think 7 points, but then Hawaii just started chipping away at the lead, and they eventually took the lead in the late stages of the set, and they eventually just pulled away, wound up winning the third set 25-20. Hawaii was led by Spiros Hakas, who had 16 kills. Teran Rosenthal had 32 assists to go along with 2 kills, 2 service aces, and 5 digs. Keep in mind, Rosenthal is 6'9", so when you see him getting a dig, it's big time right there. Alakai Todd also added 7 kills. Jazz Galloway added 5 kills. As a team, Hawaii hit 256, but that wasn't what they really shined in. They really shined from the service line, having 6 service aces and only missing 5 serves. I think there was even a point where Teran Rosenthal, according to Charlie Wade, served 20 straight serves in a row, and he didn't miss, which I think is pretty outstanding if you ask me. So Teran Rosenthal passed the eye test in terms of his first start at the collegiate level. That's my biggest takeaway for Hawaii. My biggest takeaway for Loyola, as they were led by Parker Van Buren, who had 9 kills. Daniel Fabakovic had 8 kills. Fabakovic is actually a freshman, while Van Buren is a seasoned veteran. Matt Oakley added 10 digs, and I forgot to mention Elu Choi, the new libero for Hawaii. He had 15 digs, which was outstanding. But my thing for Loyola is, and my biggest takeaway is that they obviously have to serve tough, but having 14 service errors compared to only 5 for Hawaii is basically not going to get the job done. And I know they were without Dan Mangun, but what really shined when it came to them, from my mind, was that Cole Schobel stepped in at setter, and this was a bold move from John Hawks. I get that you're now in a situation where you either have to start a freshman setter or you have to start Ryan McElliott, and Schobel eventually got the nod in midway through the second set as Loyola just could not pass as they were stuck in a bad rotation, and eventually Cole Schobel just did a little of everything. He had 5 kills, he had 9 assists. He just was the spark that Loyola needed. As the two also played on Friday, so this one actually was a little bit different, as Hawaii took the first set 25-18, and I was thinking, okay, this is looking really promising, as Hawaii didn't even have a hitting error in that first set. They even hit 666 or 667, as the Rainbow Warriors were just that impressive. And heck, Loyola even hit 276, but unfortunately, Hawaii just had everything clicking for them. Then in the second set, Loyola kind of woke up. They took that 25-22, but then set 3, Hawaii kind of righted the ship, took that 25-18, and then Loyola in set 4 jumped out to a big lead. I want to say it was 8 points, maybe 7 points. And then I was basically saying, well, this one's about to go 5. And keep in mind, this was a fairly late match, as Hawaii time, it was about 8 o'clock-ish. Central time, it was about 10-ish. And then if you were watching on Eastern time, I envy you. It was looking like it was going to go 5 sets, but then Hawaii just slowly chipped away at the lead. They're kind of like the Nebraska of men's volleyball. No lead is safe with them. But Loyola was able to get the final point, leading 24-23. I believe that was a kill from Parker Van Buren, as Loyola took that fourth set 25-23. Then set 5 was bananas. It was tight early on, but then Hawaii led 8-6 at the side switch. They eventually led 12-7, and it was at that point I was thinking, well, looks like Hawaii is about to pull away. But then Loyola scored. I want to say it was on a missed serve from Hawaii, which Hawaii had a lot of missed serves. So at the service line was Lucas Anderson. So if you don't know who Lucas Anderson is that he is actually the son of Anne-Marie Anderson, who I will be talking about in a little bit. But Lucas Anderson just went on a serving tear. His serving was just so tough, and if you've seen him play, the dude actually has quite the arm, not just swinging the ball, but serving the ball as well. And suddenly, 12-8 went to 12-9. Loyola got the point. Then 12-9 went to 12-10. Suddenly, Loyola was back in it. Then 12-10, 12-11, Loyola was only down 1. Then, at 12-11, Lucas Anderson serves up an ace. It gets unfortunately passed out of play for Loyola's sake, or for Hawaii's sake. So just like that, Lucas Anderson, the freshman who just came in as a serving specialist, he was just wheeling and dealing from the service line. And I was like, oh my goodness, Hawaii, just how did this happen for Hawaii? Loyola is just that gritty, dude. And Hawaii actually led 13-12 until Loyola just rattled off 2 in a row. And eventually they had a walk-off block. They knew that the ball was going to Spiros Hakas. And Loyola took that fifth set 15-13. Remember, they were down 12-7 in that fifth set, and they just used an 8-1 run to take that fifth set. It was just so impressive that Loyola wound up winning that match. And it wasn't just Lucas Anderson as one freshman stepping up, as well as Daniel Fabakovic that stepped up. Fabakovic actually had 13 kills and hit .417. Parker Van Buren led Loyola with 20 kills. He hit .410. Jake Reed, another freshman who I'm very familiar with, he had 12 kills, only 1 hitting error, and he hit .407. He actually started in this match as opposed to coming off the bench in the previous match. My takeaway for Loyola is their freshmen really stepped up in this match. In a match where they're on the road and they have so much uncertainty when it comes to their roster, considering their starter is out, their starting setter is out, and they just need some sort of spark. John Hawk saw the opportunity with Jake Reed, and Jake Reed also hit .407. And Cole Schobel also chipped in 9 digs, so he was actually the dig leader for Loyola as the Ramblers hit .310. It was a very impressive win. Although they had missed 14 serves, they barely got outblocked. Loyola just really came up big when it truly mattered. I know they almost let a fourth set lead kind of nearly slip away from them, but they just really shined, and their freshman class just proved it. They stepped up in a hostile environment against a seasoned veteran or a veteran Hawaii team that made the NCAA championship last year, as well as the year before and the year after that, or the year before that. Then Hawaii was led by Spiros Hakas, who had 22 kills. Alakai Todd had 12 kills. Chaz Galloway and Gerhume Voss both had 11 kills. Todd did not have a hitting error, and neither did Voss, as Todd hit .545, while Voss hit .846. Gerhume Voss was just the boss in the middle. Also, Kirst Neuster had 8 kills, and he hit .636. Surprisingly, Hawaii hit .469 in the match. But the one thing that really hurt them was the service errors. They had 27 service errors, and that is just cringe for all volleyball fans. And again, you have to serve tough in men's volleyball, otherwise you're going to be at the mercy of any opponent. But my takeaway for Hawaii is this was kind of the growing pains match, and Loyola is a good team. Charlie Wade even admitted that at the end of the broadcast when he got interviewed by the Spectrum Hawaii reporter. But I will say this, Hawaii should be fine. They have their setter, and I really think that this was kind of a little bit of a slip-up and growing pains. And also, Loyola has had nothing really much to lose, and their freshmen just really stepped up. So I really think this was a great match overall. And on a Friday as well, transitioning to Saturday, that Loyola just stepped up to the plate and they came up big. Also on Friday, we had Ball State heading down to Provo to take on number 9 BYU, number 11 Ball State taking on BYU. So as we all know, Ball State had played 3 matches prior, BYU hadn't played any, but BYU just brought out the brooms. They swept Ball State 25-19, 25-21, and 25-20. BYU was led by Luke Benson, who had 8 kills, while Mix Romanis added 8 kills. BYU also hit .321. and they held Ball State to 0 service aces and only 18 digs on the night. So my takeaway for BYU is this. It is so tough to win at Smith Fieldhouse in Provo, Utah. So nothing really against Ball State, but BYU just was ready and willing. And they had a bunch of players. They had 6 different players not registering 3 or more kills, which I think was pretty good. So not too shabby. Noah Hain also had 30 assists, so good to see him back at the setter position. Benson also led BYU with 7 digs, which was good. Ball State was led by Patrick Rogers, who had 16 kills. He hit 714, and he only had 1 hitting error. But he had half of Ball State's kills, as the next kill leader was Trevor Phillips and Vanis Buckholz, who both had 4 kills apiece. And that was redundant. Both had 4 kills apiece. My takeaway for Ball State is, where is Tanashi Davazocheva? If that is not how his last name is pronounced, I apologize. But where was Tanashi? I unfortunately don't know what happened to him. Just because without Tanashi, Ball State is at the mercy of BYU. And they did not have Tanashi in the second match. So unfortunately for Ball State, when you don't have your star outside hitter who is one of your top players that is returning, you're going to be at the mercy on the road against a top 10 team. And now, Ball State, I don't think was ultimately bad, but when you don't, like I said, no star player, you have to bank on someone else to carrying your team. And Patrick Rogers kind of did that. And he also led Ball State in digs with 5. Like I said, Ball State only had 18 digs on the night, and they had 0 service aces. Ball State didn't hit too bad. They hit 260, but it certainly was not the 321 that BYU had. For round 2, it was more of the same, as BYU swept Ball State 25-19, 25-17, and 25-16. BYU was led by Capono Brown, who had 9 kills. Mix Romanis had 8 kills. Luke Benson had 6 kills. BYU hit set 379. They held Ball State to only a 67 hitting percentage. And although they did get outdug, Ball State only had 1 service ace on the night. They both missed 14 serves, but BYU also added 6 service aces, 4 of which came from Luke Benson. And my takeaway in this match for BYU is this. When you have different players leading the way, and it's not just Luke Benson or Mix Romanis, it's Capono Brown, and maybe Tion Taylor could have himself a big night at any given moment, or Gavin Julian could have a big night as he had 4 kills. That is what makes BYU scary. And keep in mind, this is a BYU team that returns a majority of its players from last year. So for BYU, they just really looked sharp. For Ball State, they were led by Patrick Rogers, who had 9 kills. Aaron Hernandez, no, not the football player. Aaron Hernandez had 8 kills. My takeaway for Ball State is this. They need Tanashi Davazocheva in the worst way. I really think that Ball State without Tanashi is really not the greatest team, and it kind of showed. Now, maybe he got hurt or he got sick prior, but unfortunately for Ball State, without their star player, it just does not look promising for Ball State. But once they get Tanashi back, they should be ready. I'll be seeing Ball State in a couple more weeks, next week to be exact, at the First Point Collegiate Challenge in Austin, Texas. If you haven't bought your tickets already, definitely do so. Next up on Saturday, we have number 16 Lewis taking on number 6 Penn State, and this was a barn burner. I basically said in my matches to watch for that this was a definite match to watch for. It's a nice little MIVA versus EIVA matchup. Penn State took the opening set 25-18, and then Lewis took the second set quite comfortably for the most part, 25-22. Then in set 3, Penn State narrowly won it 29-27, 19 ties and 7 lead changes in that set. Then in set 4, it was a wild set. Lewis had 2 set points after it was tied 23-23, couldn't convert them. Then Penn State had 4 match points, couldn't convert them. The third time was the charm in terms of set point for Lewis, as they took the 4th set 31-29, and this one went 5 sets. I don't think anyone could have predicted Lewis and Penn State going 5. But in the 5th set, Penn State was able to hold on. Penn State actually did not trail at any point of the 5th set, though it was tied 4 times. But Penn State was able to win set 5, 15-13, avoiding the upset against the team from Romeoville. As John Kerr, my goodness, he had himself a monster night. He had 31 kills, he had 417, he had 4 service aces, and 9 digs. Monster night right there. I called him the Saturday superstar. Toby Ezeonu added 15 kills, and he had 6 blocks. Toby also had a big night in the first matchup for Penn State, as I want to say it was against Central. But for Toby Ezeonu, he actually had 10 kills on 10 swings, which I thought was very impressive on his behalf, and I really think he's one of the better middles in the nation. And yes, it was against Central State. So Toby Ezeonu having 10 kills on 10 swings, which is a hitting percentage of 1,000, is pretty darn good. Mihal Kowal added 11 kills. He hit 333 and had 7 digs. Penn State outdug Lewis 46-43, which isn't too much. Penn State hit 343 while Lewis hit 279, as Lewis was led by Max Roque, who had 16 kills. Christian Prayer had 11 kills, and Daniel Haber had 10 kills. My takeaway for Penn State is this. It's a win, and this was kind of the rusty match, as thankfully Penn State had a match underneath their belts in the first game of the season 2 nights ago. But you really can't be flirting with potential danger, because Lewis returns a good portion of their players. The problem is they don't return an All-American, they don't return an All-MIVA first-teamer. And for me, that's kind of what was the difference between winning and losing. Penn State had a good amount of returns. They returned John Kerr, Toby Ezeonu, Mihal Kowal, Ryan Merck, Owen Rose. He had 7 kills and hit 500. Ryan Merck also had 14 digs, while Lewis didn't have any player in double digits with digs, as Tyler Morgan led that department with 8. My takeaway for Lewis is this. The fact that they challenged Penn State on the road is very impressive, but my big thing is you need the experience to take down a team like Penn State. Penn State is a legit team. They have a coach who's been coaching there for about 20 years. Lewis, unfortunately, I think their coach hasn't really been coaching for too long. I want to say it's like his second or third year. But regardless, this was kind of one of those growing pains matches. But if Lewis could play like this every night, barring not winning the set, or barring the missed opportunities of winning certain sets, like set 3 and set 5, then Lewis should be fine in the MIVA. So time will tell if they'll be able to make the adjustments. Jumping over to Sunday, we had Damon at number 5 Ohio State. Now this one was a little bit of an interesting match, as Damon took the first set, 25-14. This is Damon of Buffalo, by the way, from the NEC. Damon never trailed in the first set, and they were just on one in that opening set. And I was like, whoa. The fact that they jumped out to such a big lead early on, it just made me wonder, why was Ohio State looking so off? As Ohio State hit 0 in the first set, Damon hit 444. It was just something very perplexing. Then the second set, Ohio State kind of got the ship back together as they took the second set 25-19. They never trailed, though there were 7 ties, as it looked like Ohio State was back to its normal self. Then the third set, this was the turning point of the match. Ohio State takes that third set 26-24 as there were 10 ties, and honestly, Ohio State, if they don't take that set, I'm 95% certain they have to go 5. Or, matter of fact, Damon has the momentum, because that fourth set was just pretty much all Ohio State, as they took it 25-18 as well as taking the match. Jacob Pasteur had 18 kills. He had 3 service aces. Justin Howard and Shane Wetzel both had 10 kills. Ohio State didn't have their best hitting match. They only hit 221. Their best hitting set came in set 4, where they hit 355. They did have 8 service aces compared to Damon's 6. They did get outblocked 8-12.5. They barely outdug Damon 34-30, as Damon was led by Cameron Milligan, who had 12 kills. Zach Schneider had 9 kills, and Maverick O'Neal had 8 kills. My takeaway for Ohio State is this. They cannot afford to flirt with danger like that. I was a little surprised that they just looked so uncharacteristic following in that first set, and the fact that they narrowly took that third set was a little eye-opening. But for Damon, my takeaway for them is this. I really thought they played so well on the road, but the problem is inexperience. Ohio State has so much experience on their squad, especially when they have an All-American returning, and they have the MIVA Player of the Year from last year. So all in all for Damon, this was another one of those growing pain matches. But if they could play like they did and they could eventually close those sets, I think they will be fine going forward. And then the last matchup to go over and recap is number 10 Loyola Chicago taking on number 8 Stanford. This was a match I accidentally forgot to go over in my matches to watch for in last week's show and in my weekly matches video to watch for. But it looked like this match was so, what's the word? Off. As there was only one time where Loyola led, and that was in set 2. But here's the thing for Loyola. They didn't have Jake Reed, no Parker Van Buren, no Cole Schobel. They didn't have Matt Oakley. They just didn't play their starters. It was just a whole weird match. Now, I'm not sure if it was because John Hawks wanted to give the starters from the Hawaii match some rest, because you have to remember, they played on Wednesday, and then they played Friday, and then they had to travel on Saturday to get back to Northern California, and then Sunday they just barely did not have enough time. So I can kind of understand why John Hawks maybe didn't play his players, but it was just so weird to see just not the star players. At least maybe play the freshmen like Jake Reed or whatnot. But if he's not playing his starters tonight, as of this recording, the two teams will be playing each other at 5 p.m. Pacific time, then something is not right. Stanford wound up winning the match 25-19, 25-13, and 25-20, as Will Rotman led the way with 8 kills, as well as Moses Wagner. He also had 8 kills. He hit .545. Nathaniel Gates had 7 kills on 7 swings for a hitting percentage of 1,000. Stanford hit .429 in the match. They outdug Loyola 24-14. Stanford also outblocked their opponent, they out-aced their opponent, and they had fewer service errors. Loyola was led by Colton Brooks, who had 9 kills, but that's kind of where the buck stopped, as their next kill leader was Miller Truby, who had 4 kills, although he did get some playing time in the match against Hawaii. So I don't really have too much of a takeaway, considering we did get to see Loyola's full potential. And it kind of sucks because I really thought Loyola was going to bring it. Then I hope they bring it tonight because, again, they play Stanford again at Stanford. And one thing to note is that this match was actually played at Burnham Pavilion, not in Maples Pavilion. Tonight's match, which is played on Monday between Loyola and Stanford, will be played at Maples Pavilion. And I'm hoping we do get to see Loyola's true potential. That's 95%. I'm 95% certain it's going to be on the Pac-12 network. And from what I heard, Anne-Marie Anderson will be on the call. So she'll be calling her son's game, which is pretty awesome. And that is pretty much that when it comes to the matches to watch for. So other notable matches we had in the A6 Invitational, we had UC Santa Barbara defeating NJIT 3-1. GCU swept CSUN. And then UC San Diego toppled George Mason. It was actually the first upset of the season as the Tritons beat the Patriots in 4 sets, which was big right there. It was the first official upset, and this was on Thursday. So everyone who was thinking that Loyola was the first upset of the season, unfortunately, you're wrong. Then on Friday, we had GCU sweeping UC San Diego. We had UC Santa Barbara reverse sweeping George Mason. It was looking a little bad for the Gauchos, I'm not going to lie. But the Gauchos were able to right the ship and basically reverse sweep George Mason. And CSUN took down NJIT in 4 sets. Then we had Saturday's matchups. We had George Mason picking up their first win of the season, knocking off CSUN in 4 sets. And then we had UC San Diego taking down NJIT in 5 sets. And then GCU wound up defeating UC Santa Barbara in the Battle of Unbeatens in 4 sets. And that was pretty much that, as GCU wound up winning the entire A6 Invitational, and it was kind of entertaining. I knew GCU was kind of going to win that. It was either them or maybe George Mason goes undefeated on the weekend, but George Mason missed out on a big win against UC Santa Barbara. And the unfortunate thing is that not all the matches were live streamed. The only matches that were live streamed were the UC Santa Barbara matches. Now, I understand you can't have the same crew calling 3 straight matches. It's not good for anyone's vocal cords and whatnot. But at least maybe get some sort of backup play-by-play and color commentator announcers. Maybe pay for their hotel and travel and whatnot. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to rag on UC Santa Barbara and whatnot, but I will say it would have been great to have a live stream. Instead, I had to follow the matches on live stats. But it is what it is. All right, but that is that for the Week 1 NCAA Men's Volleyball recap. Let us go over this week's AVCA Top 25 as there's some changes. Or, I'm sorry, not Top 25, Top 20. Still try to get past NCAA Women's Volleyball season. So 20 through 17 consisted of George Mason and Charleston tied at number 19, CSUN at 18, UC San Diego at 17, and then tied for 15 is Princeton and Lewis. 14 through 11 consisted of UC Santa Barbara at 14, Ball State at 13, USC at 12, and Pepperdine at 11. 10 through 6 consisted of Loyola at 10, BYU at 9, Stanford at 8, Penn State at 7, and Grand Canyon at 6. 5 through 1 consisted of Ohio State at 5, Hawaii at 4, UC Irvine at 3, Long Beach State at 2, and the still number 1 team in the AVCA coaches poll is UCLA. So the Bruins, they swept their 2 matches as they held an HBCU showcase when it came to facing a couple of their opponents, which I thought was very cool in my opinion. I really thought it was great seeing them basically face different opponents as they faced Fort Valley State, which unfortunately is not everyone's cup of tea. And then they also faced Fort Valley. They faced Fort Valley State and Morehouse. Sorry, I was blanking on the other one. But those were the 2 opponents that UCLA faced off against. And I want to say both of those 2 teams played USC, and then they also played Pepperdine as well. Hence, Pepperdine being 2-0, and then USC also being 2-0. But the schedule's going to pick up for all 3 of those teams. So those 2-0 teams that I just mentioned, I wouldn't ride home and say that they're going to the ship anytime soon, because the schedule only gets tougher from here on out. But that is going to do it for the AVCA/NVA Men's Volleyball Coaches Poll. Got to get that right, because I'm part of the NVA and whatnot. So there you have it. So that's pretty much that for the NCAA Men's Volleyball portion of the show. We're going to circle the wagons around a little bit later. But right now, let's go over some NCAA Women's Volleyball news. So Washington State announced last Friday their new head coach following the departure of Jen Greeny, who is now at West Virginia. Their new head coach, their 13th head coach in their program's history, is Corey Schroeder. So, honestly, Corey Schroeder, if you know him, if you know Washington State volleyball, he was actually part of Jen Greeny's coaching staff, Jen Greeny and Burdette Greeny, as I can confirm that Burdette Greeny did head to West Virginia with his wife. So, best wishes to the Greeny family. But for Corey Schroeder, he was actually the assistant coach, and I think this is a decent hire. I think Washington State made a decent hire with this just because you want to have familiarity with the program. You don't want to bring in an outside coach unless, of course, said coach has a lot of experience. So I think this is a decent hire by Washington State, and he knows the program. So we'll see if this can pan out. Unfortunately for Washington State, they have gotten hit hard in terms of the transfer bug, as Julia Norville was the latest transfer for them, as she now is playing beach volleyball elsewhere. But it is what it is. And then next up, we have this bit of volleyball news. So the first part was actually posted courtesy of @AvidVolley on X, and the second part was actually posted from Lincoln Arneal. the reporter who covers Nebraska volleyball. So now we are getting, so NCAA women's volleyball is now getting will now allow teams to dress 2 liberos. So what does that mean? So in case a libero gets sick, or in case a libero unfortunately gets hurt, heaven forbid, then the other team will have the second libero on standby, which I think is pretty cool. And it gives the second libero a chance to practice more in terms of practice time. And it doesn't mean that liberos will have to be running a 6-2, or a team will be running a 6-2. That's only if the coach wants to. So, yeah, 2 liberos in the rotation. I imagine it's going to be in the rotation. It's not going to be on the court at the same time. It's going to be 2 liberos in the rotation. So maybe 1 libero switches out. I have seen a 2 libero rotation in junior college back in 2017 when Orange Coast College utilized Chase Moothart. Or actually, I think it was 2014 when Orange Coast College did that. But Chase Moothart was the eventual starting libero for Orange Coast College, and he eventually got to play at The Ohio State. So there you have it right there. I don't necessarily know. Oh, now I remember the 2 liberos' names at Orange Coast College. Ryan Manoogian, who got to play at Long Beach State and is playing professionally in the NVA, and Trevor Burr. How do I know that? I got to cover that team that won the state championship. Just a little fun fact about that. So anyway, so that's the first big NCAA women's volleyball news. The second big news is that NCAA women's volleyball, and I think NCAA volleyball in general, is going to be eliminating double contacts on the second touch. So double contacts are such a tricky call. It can't be challenged, but it basically is what setters cannot afford to have. So eliminating double contact violations on the second touch is big right there. And honestly, I really think that is crucial for the game of volleyball. Does it mean that it's going a little bit lenient toward not having double hit contact violations? Most likely. But I have seen questionable double contact violations not get called. So now that there won't be any more double contacts, we're not going to be seeing any more teams or coaches or fans complain about, hey, that was a double. So it's an interesting rule. However, all of this being said, with the 2 libero rule, with the you now can dress 2 liberos and the eliminating double contacts, they must be approved by February. It needs to be approved in late February, and if that happens, then those rules will pass. However, if it doesn't happen, well, then everything will stay the same. So the rules are still pending in terms of being changed. But hat tip to at Avid Volley on X, as well as Lincoln R. Neal for breaking those bits of news right there. And before we head on into a commercial break, I have to give a shout out to Ryan Rock Perrotte, who actually notched his 100th win as Purdue Fort Wayne's men's volleyball coach. He actually accomplished this on Saturday when Purdue Fort Wayne beat North Greenville in straight sets. So a great win, and a great win for Purdue Fort Wayne, as, like I said, North Greenville is on the come-up when it comes to the Conference of Carolinas. Purdue Fort Wayne also is the team to watch for in the MIVA. I really think that the Mastodons can really make some noise this season. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited for Purdue Fort Wayne and their head coach. He actually is nicknamed Rock. So not the Rock, Rock. So Ryan Rock Perrotte. So that is right. That is right there, and that's going to basically do it for all the potpourri in terms of volleyball news. As I'll give a shout to the live chat room. We had Marcus List Great popping in the chat room. He said, salute. Patty Bax said she's still working. Have a great show. And Larry B was saying T-Rod, and he said 2 liberos. Yes, 2 liberos you can dress. However, it's not approved. And then Jen B was also in the chat room. And Ralph Calise, also in the chat room, says, better late than never tuning in to Set Point. Great show name on iSports Radio. Thank you, Ralph. I try to be creative with this. But that's going to do it for the first half of the show. Let's take a quick little break. When we come back, we got some NCAA women's volleyball transfers to go over. And then we will have the NCAA men's volleyball Week 2 preview. So keep it locked here. You are listening to Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed For All That Sports, we'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide through your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and centers. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Chi-Town Weekly will be coming up in a little bit at 7 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows at IE Sports Radio. But with that being said, let's get on into the second half of the show. So we have to go over some NCAA women's volleyball notable transfers. So in typical Set Point fashion, this news actually broke after I did my show. So this transfer news sadly broke after I did Set Point. So Taylor Landfair, the Minnesota standout, announced on her Instagram that she is actually transferring to Nebraska from Minnesota. And it was huge. I broke the news, Lincoln Arneal broke the news, Emily Eamon broke the news. Everyone broke this news on Taylor Landfair transferring from Minnesota to Nebraska. Now, unfortunately, I was told by friend of the show, and I'm guessing diehard Nebraska fan Robert Evans, that she wasn't going to make it to Nebraska and that this was probably, she was not going to have a spot on the team. Well, Robert, I will say this, and this is no knock against you. I like you. I like your passion for Nebraska volleyball, but I will also say your prediction aged poorly. Don't worry, I have predictions that age so poorly as well. So, but Nebraska getting Taylor Landfair, that's huge. It just makes their offense so much better. And I know everyone's probably everyone and their moms was saying, John Cook has transfers. He shouldn't be knocking the transfer portal. Well, I will just say this. Yes, I understand. I think what he meant to say was that his team actually had, he was referring to Texas having a lot of transfers and whatnot, like Maddie Skinner, just to name a few, and then now they're getting a bunch of transfers. But here's the thing, and this was actually reported by Lincoln Arneal, and I actually did not know this. So this next upcoming year will mark the 20th straight season that John Cook will have at least one transfer on his team, but no more than two. And I will just say, first and foremost, I did not know that. I didn't know he's had no more than two transfers from different schools the last 20 years. So I'm just very impressed, and that's a good little stat nugget right there. Now this makes me wonder how many years has it been, how many consecutive years has Jarrett Elliott or any other big-time coach had at least one transfer? It's going to be food for thought, and sadly I didn't do my homework, but it's all good. I promise y'all I'll do it next week, but look, the transfer portal is there for players and teams. Players want to go to, if a player commits to a school and then they just aren't feeling it, then they hit the transfer portal and then they go to another school for a different change of scenery, a different culture, different everything. And I've seen some volleyball players rediscover the little girl that made them fall in love with volleyball, as I've seen at Long Beach State or maybe UC Irvine, in my personal eyes and whatnot. So, in all honesty, the transfer portal is there, and look, any team can use it. No one is going to, if anyone wants to knock the transfer portal, I understand, but that's why the transfer portal is there. If we all want to get rid of it, then the NCAA committee should maybe vote on it in terms of women's volleyball. But honestly, the transfer portal is there, and it's not just for like big-time schools. It's for like little schools, such as the ones that I just mentioned, like UC Irvine or Long Beach State or Cal Poly. Look at what Cal Poly had with I'm blanking on the transfer from Indiana, but you get what I mean. Like, players can go from big little fish, big pond to big fish, little pond. So, all in all, for the transfer portal, I'm just going to say, look, I don't necessarily disagree with what John Cook says, but at the same time, I understand where he's coming from, and I understand his frustration where he's got young players. And keep in mind, he did have Merritt Beeson, so I totally get where he's coming from in terms of facing a team with multiple transfers, but it is what it is. And Tommy Stockham, that's the player I'm thinking of, and how could I forget that? She's superwoman for Cal Poly women's volleyball. But it's been a while since I've seen some NCAA women's volleyball. I'm in NCAA men's volleyball mode, FYI. Anyway, so that was that little bit of news right there. And as for my full opinion on Taylor Landfair going to Nebraska, I think it's great. I think she's going to rediscover her volleyball passion, and maybe she just wasn't feeling it at Minnesota, because you got to remember, Hugh McCutcheon stepped down, and then Keegan Cook came from Washington over to Minnesota, and unfortunately for Taylor Landfair, I guess she just wasn't feeling the whole vibe from Keegan Cook as opposed to Hugh McCutcheon, because Hugh McCutcheon was a paragon in terms of volleyball altogether, not just women's volleyball, but men's volleyball. And I'm not saying that Keegan Cook isn't a paragon, but Hugh McCutcheon built Minnesota from the ground up, and he has a masterful pedigree in terms of men's and women's volleyball. Not saying that Keegan Cook doesn't have that same pedigree, but I will say that Hugh McCutcheon he is Minnesota volleyball. Keegan Cook, while he has had experience with Washington, and now he gets to coach another Power 5 conference school, it just isn't the same. That's just my opinion, but I feel that's maybe the reason why Taylor Landfair just departed. But I don't knock her for that. But as the transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh. As Hayden Kubik, an outside hitter for Nebraska, she actually transferred to Tennessee. So that's big right there for the Lady Vols, as they did lose quite a bit of players to graduation. But with the likes of Hayden Kubik, the younger sister of Maddie Kubik, transferring, I think that's going to be a good get for Tennessee. And Tennessee is starting to load up because they lost a good portion of their players to either graduation or the transfer portal, such as Erica Lovett. But now Tennessee is on the up and up, getting talented players such as Hayden Kubik. And staying within the Big Ten in terms of transfers, and unfortunately, I have to go with this one. So another Nebraska player transferred from Nebraska to Penn State, as this one is Maggie Mendelson, a middle blocker who has 1 year of eligibility left, so I assume she's either she's going to be a senior next year, or she's a grad student. So I think it's big for Penn State, and the unfortunate thing for Nebraska, and I can't confirm this, is that they only have one scholarship remaining. So they have to be careful on who they give this scholarship to and where it goes to. So there you have it. But Maggie Mendelson going over to Penn State, I really think this is looking very promising for Penn State, as they are getting a lot of good transfers, and they return players like Jess Maruzik back as well. So you also got to remember that Penn State did graduate Allie Holland, but they still have Taylor Trammell, and with Maggie Mendelson in the fold, as well as I think she was also another middle blocker who transferred from Nebraska to Penn State. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name of hers, just because I'm going to butcher it, and then I'm going to get judged, and then we're all going to have problems, and we don't want problems. But Penn State is really building up in terms of their roster, and I would not be surprised if Penn State was able to basically vie for a possible, not just Big Ten Conference Championship, but a possible spot in the Elite Eight. So it's still a time will tell process, but I will say Penn State, do not sleep on that team. I think that team is going to be scary good. So that is that for that little bit of transfer news right there. And moving on, as unfortunately I won't be able to confirm who the other middle is. So another middle blocker has found her new home, as she transfers from Minnesota to High Point, as Arca Davis is heading from Big Ten country to Big South country. So here's the thing. Arca Davis this is actually her third school that she's at. She was at Ohio State previously, then she transferred to Minnesota, and now she is at High Point. Now she goes from Little Fish in Big Pond to Big Fish in Little Pond, and that's going to be big for High Point because they rule the Big South with an iron fist for the most part, and they're always that good perennial NCAA tournament team. So High Point getting Arca Davis is so huge. Jumping back over to Big Ten country, we have Carly Anderson, a grad student setter, transferring from Montana to Wisconsin. And that is big time right now. It's big time, but you got to remember, both their setters graduate, so you're probably thinking, well, Wisconsin has found their setter, right? Wrong. So courtesy of Cheese Trader on X, a diehard Wisconsin fan, he actually informed me that Charlie Furbringer, who played in the Under Armour All-America game in girls volleyball, she's going to be the day one setter of a 5-1 offense for Kelly Sheffield's program next year. But what will that mean for Carly Anderson? Will she get playing time as a serving sub? I don't think they're going to run 6-2, as Cheese Trader did also mention. They're not going to run 6-2. Both the setters are graduating and from this past season, and they're just going to roll with the 5-1 with Charlie Furbringer, because Charlie Furbringer did recently, and this was announced today, she actually got state Gatorade Player of the Year honors in girls volleyball, which is big time right there. But Carly Anderson going over to Wisconsin, not too shabby. And then we have Sophie Groom, who is transferring from Stetson to NC State. She's a junior middle blocker, and this is a pretty good get for NC State, as she was third in kills on Stetson with 233, and she was first in blocks with 123. And NC State being in such a competitive conference, which is now even more competitive, they're going to need all of the firepower they need to keep up with the Louisvilles, the Pitts, the Stanfords, maybe the SMUs, maybe the Georgia Techs, the Miamis. The ACC is getting more and more stacked. Also the Florida States as well. So NC State getting this transfer is pretty good. Speaking of Florida State, they landed a big-time player from the transfer portal, as they landed Taylor Head, a grad student outside hitter, as well as a beach player. So she goes from SEC to ACC, and that's a big-time get for Florida State. So as we all know, Florida State was co-champion of the ACC, which was the first time in quite a while since they last won the ACC with Chris Poole as head coach. But Taylor Head going to Florida State is big. And it also says that she could also play beach volleyball as well. So that just makes Florida State a double win right there, because Florida State, remember, has a good beach volleyball team, and I really think that they could benefit from this. And then announced today, and unfortunately this is more bad news for Nebraska, although they should be good in terms of their depth for this upcoming year. Allie Batenhorst has hit the transfer portal. She's a senior. She's going to be a senior, and she's an outside hitter, and long story short, she is a paragon for any offense. Unfortunately, Nebraska couldn't keep her, and she is hitting the transfer portal. But it is all good. I'm going to guess she's either going to go to a Big Ten school, a Power 5 school, or Long Beach State. You all are probably thinking, well, why would she go to Long Beach State? That's a massive downgrade. Well, not really, because she probably knows Tyler Hildebrand. And I know another one of Long Beach State's women's volleyball assistant coaches that was a coach at an assistant coach at Nebraska, which I think is big time right there as well. So familiarity with these Nebraska players is big. And remember, that Long Beach State did have Callie Schwarzenbach 2 seasons ago, and obviously the connection with Tyler Hildebrand was for real. So Allie Batenhorst, oh my goodness, getting her would be so big. And I forgot to mention this, that Tyler Hildebrand was named Volleyball Magazine's Coaching Hotshots. And this is no surprise, because the dude led Long Beach State to its first 21 season since, I think, 2016, maybe 2015. Either way, it's been a hot minute since Long Beach State women's volleyball has had a 21 season. And in his first year, he led them to a 19-win season, which hadn't been done in quite a while. And I was a little on the fence on if they were going to basically replicate their success or surpass their win total. But I will say, Tyler Hildebrand's done an excellent job, and I wouldn't be ultimately surprised if he landed Allie Batenhorst, but again, you got to go with a team that has the best chance of possibly winning the NCAA championship, which is why we're seeing Texas and Nebraska being these super teams. It's basically like the Alabamas of college football or college volleyball, or Alabama football trying to recruit everybody, and USC football trying to recruit everybody. So there you have it. And Natalie Morgan is her name. That's the assistant coach that's on the Long Beach State coaching staff that had some experience coaching at Nebraska. So there you have it right there. And that's why I think that Allie Batenhorst could, hence the word could, come to Long Beach State. Or she'll go to maybe Texas or another Big Ten school, or maybe she'll go to another Power 5 school, which would be big time right there. But on that note, that is basically going to do it for all the women's volleyball transfer news right there. And I'm going to be very interested to see where Allie Batenhorst ends up. I think she's going to make a tremendous impact, as most of the other players that I basically talk about will definitely make a tremendous impact. So there you have it right there. And that is basically it for all the NCAA women's volleyball transfer news. And the transfer portal is getting so popping like popcorn. And I really can't wait to see what happens next, just because it's getting really spicy. And all these transfers are coming in left and right, up and down. And we aren't even through the most of it. We still have other players in the transfer portal that are looking for a home, like Mackenzie Morris. You have Savannah Caholdhede of Indiana. We have Maddie Walk from LSU. The list goes on and on. Speaking of Indiana, they actually extended their head coach, which I think is pretty good right there. And I think that Coach Steve Aird, is basically gotten a contract extension through the 2029 season. So if you remember Indiana, they actually had quite an amazing season this past season. Yes, they didn't make the NCAA tournament, but it was still a massive improvement from the previous years, as they managed to beat the likes of Purdue, which was big. They hadn't beaten Purdue in a hot minute, as I've been saying, but I will say Steve Aird deserves a lot of credit. 21 wins this season is pretty darn good, if you ask me. I really think that Steve Aird definitely deserves the contract extension. And in addition, Indiana also beat Miami, which also made the NCAA tournament. And they have I'm looking at some of their other notable matches. They went 5 with Penn State. Like I said, they beat Purdue. They beat Ohio State, which isn't too terrible, even though they lost the other one. So if Indiana could have gotten at least one more notable win, I think they maybe could have made the NCAA tournament. But unfortunately, it is what it is, and they unfortunately missed out on the tournament. But Indiana should be somewhat good next year. I think they have the potential to being good, but the Big Ten is getting even bigger, so that's my only concern for them. But Steve Aird definitely deserves the contract extension all the way through 2029. It's basically a 5-year extension, which I think is awesome sauce, if not maybe a 4-season extension. I wasn't the best at math, but there you have it. All right, but that is that for NCAA women's volleyball news. Now let's get into the NCAA men's volleyball Week 2 preview. So we have some pretty good matches this week, as now we're getting into the swing of things. We're starting to get into everyone starting their season. So we'll start with the sneaky good matches. Wednesday, we have St. Francis at UC Irvine. All right, so St. Francis was chosen to finish first in the Northeastern Conference, or the NEC, but they face UC Irvine, which kicks off its week this week, as they have 3 matches. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. I think St. Francis can maybe hold their own, but UC Irvine is going to be so good with Halir Heno. My big thing for UC Irvine is who's going to be the starting setter, and who's going to be the starting setter? Joe Carlos or oh my goodness, how am I blanking on this guy's name already? Brett Sheward or Joe Carlos is going to be the starting setter. That's the big question right there. Then Friday, we have LIU at number 2, Long Beach State. Long Beach State kicks off its season with LIU as well as St. Francis. I think it's a little bit of a sneaky good matchup. LIU won the NEC tournament last year, and St. Francis was the runner-up. But this year, Long Beach State is going to be returning a bunch of its players, like Mason Briggs, Sotir Shapanis, Simon Torwey, Clark Godbold, and they have a bunch of other good, really talented players that they brought in terms of their freshman class. And then you also have the likes of Aiden Knipe, who's returning at setter. So Long Beach State is going to be such a good team. And you also have Alan Knipe, who's the head coach. Got to make note of that. Then Saturday and Sunday, Lincoln Memorial has two pretty good matches. They face number 12 USC on Saturday at USC, and then on Sunday they are at number 11 Pepperdine. All right, so Lincoln Memorial, as we all know, they're not ranked. I was going to put their matches in the matches to watch for, but unfortunately Lincoln Memorial dropped out of the top 20 as UC San Diego jumped into the top 20 with their win over George Mason. Upset win over George Mason, for that matter. So for Lincoln Memorial, this is their chance to prove that they deserve to be ranked. And this is their chance to kind of prove that they can be the LMU of NCAA men's volleyball, because I think there used to be an LMU in terms of men's volleyball, and they discontinued the program, which was sad face. All right, but now for the actual matches to watch for. So we get tied for number 19 George Mason taking on number 3 UC Irvine. This is on Tuesday. All right, so bear in mind that UC Irvine has to play the first half of its season at home at Crawford Hall. It's not going to be at the Brent Event Center. It's going to be at Crawford Hall. So unfortunately for UC Irvine, they got to play at Crawford Hall, but I imagine that David Niffin's team is practicing in Crawford Hall while the men's and women's basketball team gets to the Brent Event Center. I'm certain UC Irvine shouldn't have too many problems, but George Mason, having 3 Big West opponents under its belt, is big time right there. I would not be surprised if George Mason made UC Irvine sweat a little. And remember, this is 3 straight matches, 3 matches this week that UC Irvine is playing. Then on Thursday, we have number 17 UC San Diego taking on number 13 Ball State. All right, this is going to be a big week for UC San Diego. They went 2-1 last week with its only loss coming against GCU. Now they got to prove themselves against Ball State. I don't know what the status is for Tanashi Davazocheva, but don't be surprised if this young and upstart UC San Diego team makes Ball State sweat a little. I really think that UC San Diego does have something going. They have a good young core this year. They returned a majority of its players from last year, so outside of Ryan Kaw. So all in all for UC San Diego, I think I won't say they will win, but playing at Ball State is going to be a good test. Also on Thursday, we have number 9 BYU at number 10 Loyola. All right, so it's another MIVA opponent for the Cougars, as they are playing a very talented Loyola of Chicago team who is playing tonight against Stanford at Maples Pavilion. So for Loyola, this is another really tough ranked matchup, as they got another one later on in the season. Their first 6 opponents are against ranked opponents. The good thing for Loyola is they don't have to go to Provo to play this match. If they had to go to Provo to play BYU, I would go as far as to say that Loyola might not have a shot, especially since they're traveling so much. But now they get a chance to be at home, and they take on a very talented BYU team. For BYU, they now have to be out of their comfort zone quite a bit, as they're going from Provo to Chicago. And who knows, maybe BYU will pull out the win, but don't be surprised, because Loyola has so much experience, and once they get a little bit of rest, because I know they're going to be traveling from Northern California to back home to Chicago. They're going to have a rest day on Tuesday just because they traveled, and then Wednesday they're basically they should have at least 1 day of practice, because those are the NCAA rules right there. Unless they travel late on Monday or late today, and then they get back on Tuesday, and then they rest because it's a travel day, and then they practice on Wednesday. But it's food for thought right there. Also on Thursday, we have number 1 UCLA taking on tied for number 15 Lewis. All right, so UCLA got the first couple matches out of the way, but now the schedule is going to start to increase in terms of level of difficulty. And this is a good little tune-up before the First Point Collegiate Challenge, as UCLA takes on Lewis. Lewis took Penn State to 5. I imagine that Lewis is going to bring the energy since they're basically at home. And honestly, don't be surprised if Lewis kind of gives UCLA some fits, but I really think that UCLA is going to come out on top just because they returned so much in terms of not just their conference honorees, but their All-American honorees. Then Friday, we have number 8 Stanford hitting the road to God's country, or Santa Barbara, to take on number 14 UC Santa Barbara. All right, for Stanford, they have already kicked off their season, or they already kicked off their season yesterday with a solid win, even though Loyola didn't play its starters. Tonight they play Loyola, and then Friday they play UC Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara looked very good. Their freshmen, Josh Aruya and George Bruning, they look so sharp. And Jess Bianchi is straight up phenomenal for UC Santa Barbara. And Jaden Glenn was solid at the libero position. So all in all for UC Santa Barbara, don't be surprised if they put a little bit of a scare into Stanford. I just think Stanford has more experience, but for me, UC Santa Barbara has the height. I just think Stanford has the athleticism. And also Stanford has the experience. Then we have a full slate on Saturday, as we have number 17 UC San Diego taking on number 5 Ohio State. All right, Ohio State was able to win both its matches last week as they took down Damon and North Greenville, but don't be surprised if UC San Diego does give it a little bit of a scare. I still think Ohio State's probably going to win just based off of experience alone and being at home, but Ohio State needs to learn to not play with fire, because if they do, then they could be in a world full of hurt when they take on an actual good team like a UCLA or a USC or a Loyola of Chicago or a Ball State. So Ohio State, I definitely can see winning, but the UC San Diego Tritons have a lot to prove this week, and they don't have much to lose. I mean, if they lose, then so be it. They lost to 2 teams that were ranked above them, but they're going to play their guts out. Believe that. Also on Saturday, we have my match of the week, number 1 UCLA at number 10 Loyola. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why did you pick this matchup? Well, spoiler alert, UCLA is probably going to be match of the week next week at the First Point Collegiate Challenge, but the reason why I gave UCLA Loyola match of the week is because John Hawks was a former UCLA men's volleyball assistant coach, and this is the first time Loyola is going to be playing UCLA under the watchful eye of John Hawks. And the fact that Loyola has some experience playing some big-time teams like Hawaii and Stanford and BYU going into this week, I think Loyola could give UCLA a little bit of a surprise. I definitely can see UCLA winning. The only way they don't win is if they look ahead to the First Point Collegiate Challenge, but there's no such thing as looking ahead. I think all these coaches have their players ready to go each and every day. They have them nutritioned, and they have themselves attritioned, and they also have them watching film just to make sure they don't miss anything. So I really think UCLA is going to be a fun little matchup right there. And I'm excited to see what the Bruins can do against the Ramblers. And then also on Saturday, we have number 8 Stanford at number 14 UC Santa Barbara. So it's basically round 1 and round 2, both at UC Santa Barbara. Again, don't be surprised if UC Santa Barbara kind of surprises Stanford. I just think based off of experience and athleticism, I got the Cardinal winning that. But I think the Gauchos can definitely make a match of it. And if Jess Bianchi, as well as the other pin hitters, can step up, I think that those Gauchos can pull an upset. And another player that I need to make note of is Ben Court. Ben Court is also a great player. Jack Walmer also has been excelling at setter. He's done really good, especially coming from Hawaii last season. So I really think that the Gauchos have a fair shot. And then on Saturday, we have a really good matchup, in my opinion. Tied for number 15, Princeton, at number 3, UC Irvine. So this is an interesting matchup right here. I really like Sam Schweisky scheduling West Coast opponents, because now I know Princeton has to play their games on the road to start the season, but playing their West Coast road trip for a second straight year, if not maybe a third or fourth straight year, is definitely something ideal for the Tigers. And Princeton has some good players. They have some stud players on their team. I really think that they're very underrated in my opinion. I feel UC Irvine, based on experience alone, will probably win, but I would not be surprised if Princeton made UC Irvine work for that win. I really think Princeton is going to do great things this year. And don't be surprised if Princeton gives UC Irvine some fits. And then closing off the notable matches for this week, we have number 8 BYU tied for number 15 Lewis. So BYU and UCLA get to switch opponents. So I kind of call this the MPSF MIVA crossover. So for BYU, it's another test on the road as they face Lewis, which gets another home test. My thing for Lewis is they might have a shot against BYU, but BYU returns so much talent on that team. And they face UCLA as well as a talented upstart BYU team that really shattered expectations from last year. And they didn't even have expectations last year. They just had zero expectations, and they did so great last year. So for me, I think Lewis is going to really bring it in this match, but I would have to defer to BYU. However, I just think we're in for a great matchup, especially since Lewis took Penn State to 5. Now, I'm not sure if that's Penn State just struggling, but you also had to remember that Penn State was in a little bit of a, I wouldn't say crisis, but they had that big old question mark on who is going to be their setter. And their setter actually is Michael Schwab, who is a freshman. So I thought it was going to be Josh Rosenblum, who transferred from Long Beach State, but unfortunately it is not. So in my mind, I think Penn State is still trying to get its kinks out, but time will tell, in my opinion. I really think that Penn State is on the up and up, and they don't really have too many. Speaking of Penn State, they don't really play anyone too big. They play King and Lees McRae. Next week is going to be fun for them as they play Stanford and UCLA. But back to Lewis, I just think that the Lewis losing to Penn State was kind of a mixture of Lewis being spry, upright, and filled with youth, as well as returning players. And then Penn State's still trying to figure out the setter position, just because, remember, Penn State lost Cal Fisher to graduation. They lost that entire big senior class from last year, and they're still trying to pick up the pieces and basically try to, get everything settled in. As, again, Michael Schwab was the setter. They also had Luke Snyder setting, and I guess Josh Rosenblum won't be the setter for Penn State, but it is what it is, and maybe Rosenblum has to earn his minutes, but I think they're set on Michael Schwab. But over to Lewis, I feel BYU is probably going to win. I feel BYU has the more experience and the more returners in terms of their honorees from last season. But again, Lewis, don't be surprised if they throw everything in the kitchen sink at the Cougars. I really think Lewis has some potential. They're trying to pick up the pieces after the Tyler Mitchum days, where Tyler Mitchum just had to carry that team night in and night out. And this year, this year is going to be year 2 without Tyler Mitchum. And hopefully for their sake, they're able to get everything figured out before MIVA play. Because if they don't, then the MIVA is going to swallow them whole. Because it's not just Ohio State, Loyola, and Ball State really good. Purdue Fort Wayne is on the up and up. We also have Lindenwood, which could be pretty solid. And then McKendree, which pulled off a massive upset in the MIVA tournament last year. They could be on the up and up. So all in all, for Lewis, this is a big week for them. And as long as they see progress in their non-conference schedule, I think they should be fine in terms of maybe making noise in MIVA play, but time will tell. All right, but that's going to do it for all my matches to watch for in Week 2. If there are any matches that I might have missed, just let me know, as long as it's notable, in my opinion. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to Cale Henderson as well. He popped into the chat room in the second half of the show. He said, full disclosure, I don't know what a libero is until I started listening to Teran. Well, I appreciate that, Cale. And he also said, great show. Shout out to the other parts of the chat room as well as the other people in the chat room. Larry B, Ralph Calise, Jen B, Patty Bax, and Marcus Los. Great Just a reminder to everybody that next week, Set Point's going to be going live on Tuesday at noon Pacific time, most likely, which would be 2 p.m. my time. Because Monday I do have plans, and sadly I won't be able to do Set Point on Monday. But it's all good. But for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!